The mop moved in slow, rhythmic circles across the marble floor, back and forth, like a heartbeat no one bothered to notice. Marcus Thornton had been cleaning the 22nd floor of Harrington Holdings for exactly 3 months, 11 days, and approximately 7 hours. Not that anyone was counting, not that anyone ever looked up from their laptops or their lattes long enough to see the man in the gray uniform pushing his yellow bucket through the hallways of power. He was 34 years old. His hands were calloused from years of honest work. His back ached from bending over surfaces that gleamed for people who would never know his name. And somewhere across the city, in a cramped apartment in West Philadelphia, his 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, was sleeping under a blanket that smelled like fabric softener and hope. That was what Marcus thought about when the nights grew long and the fluorescent lights hummed their lonely song above him. He thought about Sophie, about her gap-toothed smile when he came home in the mornings, about the way she saved her best drawings for him, tucking them under his pillow like little paper prayers. The night shift at Harrington Holdings ran from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. 8 hours of invisibility, 8 hours of watching the city sleep through floor-to-ceiling windows while he scrubbed coffee stains and emptied trash cans filled with documents worth more than his annual salary. Marcus did not complain. He had stopped complaining a long time ago, around the same time he stopped believing that the world owed him anything at all. Life had taught him that lesson early and often. His mother had died when he was 19, leaving behind medical bills that swallowed his college fund whole. His marriage had crumbled 3 years ago when Charlotte, his ex-wife, chose the bottle over their daughter. The court had given him full custody, and Charlotte had disappeared into whatever dark corner of the country would have her. Now it was just Marcus and Sophie against the world, a 34-year-old janitor and a 7-year-old dreamer. They did not have much, but they had each other, and some nights that felt like everything. The apartment in West Philadelphia was small, 2 bedrooms, if you could call the closet-sized space where Sophie slept a bedroom. The walls were thin enough to hear the arguments next door, the crying babies upstairs, the sirens that cut through the night like mechanical wolves. The heater coughed and sputtered through the winter months, never quite committing to warmth. The windows rattled when the wind blew too hard, and the ceiling had a water stain shaped like the state of Texas that Marcus had been meaning to fix for 6 months. But Sophie had decorated her tiny room with drawings of butterflies and rainbows and stick figures holding hands under bright yellow suns. She had hung Christmas lights along the wall that stayed up all year round because they made the darkness feel less dark. She had named the water stain Larry and told Marcus that Larry was their friend watching over them while they slept. That was Sophie, 7 years old and already teaching her father how to find beauty in broken things. Eleanor Simmons lived in apartment 4B right across the hall. She was 68 years old with silver hair, she wore in a tight bun, and reading glasses that made her eyes look twice their normal size. Her husband Frank had passed away 4 years ago, and she had been collecting cats and crossword puzzles ever since. She had 3 cats now, Harold Margaret and a mean orange tabby named General Patton, who hissed at everyone except Sophie. Eleanor watched Sophie every night while Marcus worked. She refused to take money for it no matter how many times Marcus tried to press crumpled bills into her weathered hands. "You saved that money for that little girl's future," Eleanor would say, waving him away like he was being ridiculous. "I'm not doing anything but sitting here anyway. Might as well sit here with company." But Marcus knew the truth. Eleanor needed them as much as they needed her. The loneliness of widowhood had carved deep valleys into her soul, and Sophie's laughter filled those valleys with something like light. Every night when Marcus dropped Sophie off before his shift, Eleanor had hot chocolate waiting. Every morning when he picked Sophie up, there were pancakes on the table. "You're a good man, Marcus Thornton," Eleanor told him once when Sophie was asleep on her couch, and the night was heavy with quiet. "Don't let this world convince you otherwise." Marcus had not known what to say to that. He was not sure he believed it. Good men did not live in crumbling apartments. Good men did not work jobs that paid barely enough to keep the lights on. Good men did not watch their daughters wear shoes with holes in them because there was not enough money for new ones. But he had smiled anyway because Eleanor needed to believe it, and sometimes that was enough. The morning everything changed started like any other morning. Marcus was finishing his rounds on the 22nd floor, the executive level, the place where the real decisions were made. The sun was just beginning to rise over Philadelphia, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Marcus could see through the massive windows. He liked this time of day, the liminal space between night and morning when the building was almost peaceful. The boardroom was empty, or at least it was supposed to be empty. The quarterly meeting was not scheduled to start for another hour, but Marcus could see through the glass doors that someone had left a mess from the night before. Coffee cups, scattered papers, a whiteboard covered in numbers that meant nothing to him. He pushed his bucket toward the door, ready to clean up before the executives arrived in their expensive suits and their cloud of importance. But as he reached for the handle, he heard voices inside. The meeting had started early. Marcus hesitated. He knew the rules. Never interrupt the executives. Never make eye contact with the executives. Never let the executives remember that you exist. He was supposed to be invisible, a ghost in gray coveralls, and ghosts did not open doors to boardrooms where billion-dollar decisions were being made. He turned to leave. He would come back later after they were gone. He would clean their mess, then like he always did, like he was supposed to. But something made him stop. Through the glass, he could see a woman standing at the head of the long oak conference table. Victoria Harrington, the CEO. The billionaire whose name was on the building, whose face was on the billboards, whose signature was probably worth more than Marcus would earn in 10 lifetimes. She was speaking, her voice muffled through the glass, but her gestures sharp and confident. 7 people sat around the table, men and women in suits that probably cost more than Marcus earned in a year. They were watching her with the kind of attention that money and power commanded. Marcus knew who Victoria Harrington was. Everyone in Philadelphia knew who Victoria Harrington was. She had built her empire from the ground up, turning her father's failing real estate company into a multi-billion-dollar holdings conglomerate. The newspapers called her the Ice Queen. The business magazines called her a visionary. The cleaning staff called her nothing at all because they had never been close enough to call her anything. She was 43 years old with auburn hair that fell past her shoulders and eyes the color of steel. She wore power like other women wore perfume, and she had never once looked at Marcus in the 3 months he had been cleaning her building. He turned away. This was not his world. These were not his people. He was a janitor, a single father, a man who mopped floors and emptied trash cans and went home to a daughter who thought he was a superhero, even though he had never saved anyone from anything. That was when he heard the scream. It cut through the glass like a knife, high-pitched and terrified. Marcus spun around and saw Victoria Harrington clutching her chest. Her face had gone white. Her mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. She swayed once, twice, and then she collapsed. Her body hit the floor like a puppet with cut strings. The boardroom erupted into chaos. People jumped to their feet. Someone knocked over a coffee cup. A woman in a gray blazer screamed again, her hands pressed to her mouth. But no one moved toward Victoria. No one knelt beside her. No one did anything except stare at the woman on the floor like she was a problem they had not been trained to solve. Marcus did not think. His body moved before his mind could catch up, years of instinct taking over. He burst through the boardroom doors, pushing past the wall of expensive perfume and designer suits, his mop clattering to the floor behind him. "What are you doing?" someone barked. A man in a charcoal suit, his face twisted with confusion and anger. "You don't belong in here." "Get out," another voice snapped. "This is a private meeting." But Marcus was already on his knees beside Victoria Harrington. Her lips were turning blue. Her chest was not moving. Her eyes were half open, staring at nothing at all. "She's not breathing," Marcus shouted over his shoulder. "Call 911, now." No one moved. They stood there like statues, these titans of industry, these masters of the universe, frozen in place, while a woman died on the floor in front of them. Marcus pressed 2 fingers to Victoria's neck. No pulse. He had taken a CPR class once at the West Philadelphia Community Center. It was free, and they gave out food vouchers at the end, and Sophie had been hungry that week. He had sat in a folding chair for 2 hours watching an instructor demonstrate chest compressions on a plastic dummy, never imagining that he would actually need to use what he learned. But the instructor's voice was echoing in his head now, cutting through the panic like a beacon. If they're not breathing, you are their lungs. If their heart has stopped, you are their heartbeat. You do not stop until someone takes over or until you physically cannot continue. You are the only thing standing between them and death. Marcus tilted Victoria's head back. He pinched her nose. He leaned down and pressed his mouth to hers, breathing life into lungs that had forgotten how to work. 1 breath. 2 breaths. "Oh my God," someone gasped. "Is he kissing her? What is he doing?" Get him off her. Marcus ignored them. He laced his fingers together and placed them on Victoria's sternum. He began compressions, counting in his head like the instructor had taught him. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's assault, a voice hissed. He's assaulting her. Security. Somebody call security. 15, 16, 17. Something hard crashed into Marcus's back. A sharp, brutal pain that stole his breath and made his vision blur. Someone had hit him. An umbrella maybe, or a briefcase. He did not know and he did not care. He kept counting. 22, 23, 24. Another blow landed on his shoulder. He heard shouting, felt hands grabbing at his arms, trying to pull him away. But he was stronger than he looked, this man, who had spent his life lifting heavy things and bending his back to floors that never said thank you. 28, 29, 30. He leaned down again. 2 more breaths. Mouth to mouth. Life to death. You filthy janitor, someone spat. Get your hands off her. Marcus started compressions again. His arms were burning. His back was screaming. His eyes were stinging with sweat and tears and something that felt like rage. Don't die, he whispered between counts. Don't you dare die like this. A hand grabbed his shoulder and yanked him backward. He tore himself free and kept going. More breaths, more compressions. The world around him had shrunk to the size of this woman's chest, rising and falling beneath his hands. And then, like a miracle, like the sun breaking through storm clouds, Victoria Harrington's chest jerked violently. She coughed once, twice, and then she sucked in air like someone being pulled from the bottom of the ocean. Her eyes fluttered open, confused, terrified, alive. Marcus collapsed backward, his whole body trembling. His back was on fire. His shoulders were raw. His hands were numb from the force of the compressions. But she was breathing. Her chest was rising and falling with the rhythm of life, and that was all that mattered. The expensive suits swarmed around her, now suddenly brave, suddenly concerned, tripping over themselves to kneel beside the woman they had watched almost die. Victoria, Victoria, stay with us. Someone get water, get a blanket. The paramedics are coming, just hold on. The boardroom doors burst open and emergency responders rushed in, their equipment clattering against the marble floor. They took over with practiced efficiency, lifting Victoria onto a stretcher, checking her vitals, speaking in the calm and measured tones of people who face death every day. One of the paramedics turned back and looked at the room full of executives. Who started CPR? I did, Marcus said. His voice was weak, barely above a whisper. The paramedic nodded. You saved her life. Before Marcus could respond, a tall man with silver hair stepped forward. His badge read Preston Caldwell, CFO. His face was twisted with something that looked like disgust. What's your name? He demanded. Marcus Thornton. I'm a janitor here. Preston Caldwell looked at Marcus like he was something that had crawled out of a drain. You put your mouth on Miss Harrington, he said. The words dripped with accusation, with contempt, with the certainty of a man who had never been questioned in his life. She wasn't breathing, Marcus replied. I was performing CPR. I'll be reviewing the security footage, Preston said. You need to leave immediately. Do not return to this building until you are contacted by human resources. Marcus's throat tightened. He looked around at the executives whose boss he had just saved from dying in front of them. 7 faces, 14 eyes, not a single one would meet his gaze. Not a single one said thank you. He bent down and picked up his mop with trembling hands. He pushed his bucket toward the door, each step heavier than the last. The paramedics were wheeling Victoria Harrington out of the boardroom, an oxygen mask over her face monitors, beeping with the sound of her survival. She was alive because of him. She was breathing because he had breathed for her. And yet somehow, as Marcus walked out of that room, he felt like the criminal. The bus ride home was long and silent. Marcus sat hunched in a hard plastic seat, his back curved like a question mark, his eyes staring at nothing. The city moved past the window in a blur of colors and sounds that felt like they belonged to another world. His back was throbbing where they had hit him. His shoulders ached. His hands still tingled from the force of the compressions. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the cold dread settling in his chest. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones in the way Preston Caldwell had looked at him in the silence of the executives who had watched him save a life and said nothing. By the time the bus dropped him off in West Philadelphia, the sun was fully up and the neighborhood was coming to life around him. Kids were playing in the alley. A man was selling hot dogs from a battered cart on the corner. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing music too loud. Sophie ran to meet him at the door barefoot, clutching her worn-out teddy bear. "You're home late," she said, her tiny voice worried. "Are you okay, Daddy?" Marcus knelt down and pulled her into a hug. She smelled like syrup and sleep, and for a moment he let himself pretend that everything was fine. "I'm okay, sweetheart," he said. Another lie. Another weight added to the pile. "Just a crazy day at work." Eleanor was standing in the doorway of her apartment, her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "I'm fine, Eleanor." Marcus forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. Just tired. But he was not fine. And deep down in a place he did not want to acknowledge, he knew that this was only the beginning. That night, Marcus lay on his thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. The heater sputtered in the corner. The water stain named Larry watched over him in silence. Sophie was asleep beside him, her breath soft and even, her small hand curled around his thumb. He should have felt proud. He had saved a woman's life. He had done something good, something heroic, something that mattered. But all he felt was the cold certainty that something terrible was coming. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from a coworker. "Saw what happened this morning. People are talking. Be careful." Marcus stared at the message until the screen went dark. Be careful of what? The next morning, Marcus put on his gray uniform and took the bus to Harrington Holdings. The sun was barely up, painting the sky in soft shades of amber, and he tightened his grip on his lunch bag as he approached the revolving door. A security guard stepped in front of him before he could touch the handle. "Sir, you can't enter." Marcus blinked. "What, I work here? Night shift? 22nd floor." The guard did not even look at him. "I've been instructed not to let you in." "Instructed by who? I didn't do anything wrong." "Contact Human Resources," the guard said, his voice flat and final. "You are not permitted on the premises." A cold shiver ran down Marcus's spine. He stood there frozen as streams of office workers pushed past him without a second glance. He was a pebble in a river, and the current did not care if he drowned. He circled around to the side entrance, clinging to the hope that this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe someone forgot to update his shift schedule. Maybe they needed to talk to him about the CPR. Maybe, just maybe, this would all make sense. At the service desk, his supervisor looked up with an expression that killed the hope in Marcus's chest. "Wait here," the man said. Marcus waited in the narrow hallway beside the row of staff lockers. His name was still written on locker number 7 in messy black marker. Crooked. Familiar. Like he still belonged here. 10 minutes later, the supervisor returned with a sealed envelope in his hand. "You're terminated," he said. The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. "Terminated? Why? What did I do?" The supervisor shrugged. "HR says it's for inappropriate conduct involving senior personnel. That's all I know." Marcus's hands trembled as he tore open the envelope. Inside was a termination letter and his final paycheck. No severance. No explanation. Just the words "employment ended immediately," printed in coal black ink. The phrase "inappropriate conduct" echoed in his skull like a siren. "I saved her life," Marcus said. His voice cracked. "She wasn't breathing. I gave her a software. That's what you do when someone isn't breathing." The supervisor would not meet his eyes. "I'm just a messenger, Marcus. Clean out your locker. Leave your uniform. Security will escort you out." Marcus stood there for a long moment, the termination letter crumpling in his fist. 3 months. 3 months of perfect attendance, of scrubbing floors that executives walked on without thinking of making himself invisible so that Sophie could have a father with a job. Gone. All of it gone. He cleaned out his locker in silence. There was not much inside. A spare pair of work gloves. A photo of Sophie from her first day of school. A granola bar he had been saving for a rough shift. Security escorted him out through the loading dock, away from the main entrance, away from the people who might see a man being marched out like a criminal. The door slammed shut behind him, and just like that, Marcus Thornton was erased. Back outside, the city carried on as if nothing had happened. People in suits sipped their lattes. Taxi horns blared. Phones rang and conversations continued, and the whole machine of commerce kept turning oblivious to the man standing on the sidewalk with his entire life unraveling. Marcus slumped onto a bus stop bench, his legs giving out beneath him. His phone buzzed. A message from a coworker. A screenshot from the company group chat. See that? That janitor creep was all over Miss Harrington when she passed out. Another message appeared below it. Looked like he was kissing her. Disgusting. And another. Was that assault? Marcus's chest tightened. His fingers went cold. They had twisted the truth. The CPR, the breaths that saved Victoria Harrington's life, they had turned it into something vile, something dirty, something that a poor janitor in a gray uniform had no right to give to a woman worth billions. His phone buzzed again. A blurry image this time captured from security footage. Marcus was leaning down toward Victoria, his mouth inches from hers, a moment of salvation frozen in pixels and reframed as evidence of something criminal. He let the phone drop onto his thigh and looked up. Above him, a giant billboard showed Victoria Harrington's face. She was smiling, powerful, untouchable. The slogan beside her read, "Integrity, Vision, Leadership." Marcus felt sick. The bus ride home was a blur. Sophie met him at the door again, her face bright with surprise. "You're home early, Daddy." "They fired me, sweetheart." The words came out before he could stop them. Sophie's smile crumbled, and her eyes filled with confusion, then something worse. Something that looked like fear. "Why?" "I don't know," Marcus said. The lie felt heavier this time. "Just a misunderstanding. It'll be okay." Eleanor was watching from the kitchen counter, the tea muted behind her. She did not say anything, but her eyes held the weight of understanding. She had seen this before. She had watched the world chew up good people and spit them out. That night, Marcus sat on the edge of Sophie's bed while she drifted off to sleep. He stroked her hair and hummed a lullaby that his mother used to sing, a melody he had almost forgotten until Sophie was born, and it came back to him like a gift from the past. "Daddy," Sophie's voice was thick with sleep. "Yes, sweetheart. You're a good person. I know you are." Marcus swallowed hard, fighting the tightness in his throat. "Thank you, baby. Go to sleep now." But long after Sophie's breathing had deepened into the rhythm of dreams, Marcus lay awake in the darkness. His phone kept buzzing with messages. Voicemails from numbers he did not recognize. A text from his sister saying people at church were talking about some video they saw online. He turned the phone off and let the silence swallow him. The injustice was too enormous to process. He had saved a woman's life, and now he was being punished for it. He had pressed his mouth to hers because that was how you breathed for someone who could not breathe for themselves, and they had turned it into something shameful. Outside, a siren wailed. Inside, the heater coughed its familiar complaint. And somewhere high above the city, in a penthouse that cost more than Marcus would earn in 100 lifetimes, Victoria Harrington was probably sleeping peacefully, never knowing that the man who saved her life was lying in the dark, wondering how he was going to feed his daughter tomorrow. The next few days were the worst of Marcus's life. He walked the streets of Philadelphia with his resume in hand, knocking on every door that might have work for a man with strong arms and a willingness to do whatever needed to be done. The laundromat on the corner needed help folding clothes. Marcus filled out an application. The manager looked at his name, typed something into her computer, and her face changed. "I'm sorry," she said. "We're not hiring right now." The diner on 5th Street had a sign in the window. "Help wanted, dishwasher." Marcus walked in with hope in his chest. "You're the guy from that building, aren't you?" the owner asked. "The one who—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. Try somewhere else. Every door that opened closed just as quickly. Marcus's name had become poison, spreading through the neighborhood like smoke. People whispered when he walked by. Mothers pulled their children closer. The teenagers outside the convenience store laughed and pointed and said things loud enough for him to hear. "That's him, the janitor guy. Saw the video. Dude was totally creeping on that billionaire lady." Marcus kept walking. He kept his head down and his hands in his pockets and his heart locked behind a wall that grew higher with each passing hour. Sophie came home from school one day with tears streaming down her face. "They said you're a bad person," she sobbed. "They said you hurt someone. I told them you didn't. I told them you're a hero, but they wouldn't listen." Marcus knelt down and held his daughter while she cried. He did not have words for her. He did not have explanations or reassurances or promises that things would get better. All he had was his arms around her and his heart breaking quietly in his chest. "I know the truth," he whispered into her hair. "And you know the truth. That's what matters." But it was not enough. The truth did not pay the rent. The truth did not put food on the table. The truth did not stop the whispers or the stares or the slow suffocating weight of being judged for something he did not do. Eleanor tried to help. She brought over casseroles and offered to watch Sophie whenever Marcus needed to go looking for work. But Marcus could see the strain on her face, the way her neighbors were treating her differently now that she was associated with him. "You should distance yourself from me," Marcus told her one night. "I don't want this to affect you." Eleanor fixed him with a look that could have cut glass. "I've been alive for 68 years, Marcus Thornton. I've buried a husband and 3 siblings and more friends than I can count. I've survived things that would break most people in half. And you think I'm going to abandon you because some idiots on the internet decided to believe a lie?" She reached out and squeezed his hand. "You're family, and family doesn't run." The phone call came at 2 in the morning, 4 days after Marcus was fired. He fumbled for his phone in the darkness, his heart pounding. "Mr. Thornton." A woman's voice, cold, professional, rehearsed. "Yes. This is Human Resources from Harrington Holdings. I'm calling to inform you that our internal investigation is complete." Marcus sat up in bed, hope flickering in his chest like a candle in a windstorm. "Our review has determined that your conduct on the morning in question was inappropriate and potentially harmful. Your employment has been terminated, effective immediately. We will not be pursuing legal action at this time, but we strongly advise you not to return to the premises or attempt to contact any Harrington Holdings employees." The flicker of hope died. "Inappropriate," Marcus's voice rose. "I was performing CPR. She wasn't breathing. I saved her life. The decision is final, Mr. Thornton. Your last check will be mailed to your address of record. Have a good evening." The line went dead. Marcus sat in the darkness, the phone still pressed to his ear, listening to the silence. Sophie stirred beside him, mumbling something about pancakes in her sleep. He looked at his daughter's peaceful face and felt something inside him crack. "God," he whispered to the empty room, "if you're listening, what am I supposed to do now?" Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Rain began to drum against the window. The leaky gutter above the window tapped a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, like a clock counting down to something Marcus could not see. He did not know that miles away in a penthouse bathed in soft light, Victoria Harrington was waking up from a nightmare. She was clutching her chest, gasping for air, haunted by the echo of a voice that had pulled her back from the edge of death. She did not know his name yet, but she would. And when she finally learned the truth about what her company had done to the man who saved her life, everything was going to change. 2 weeks passed like stones sinking into dark water. Slow, heavy, inevitable. Marcus Thornton stopped counting the days after the first 7. Time had lost its meaning when every morning felt the same as the one before. Wake up, pretend to smile for Sophie, walk the streets looking for work, come home empty-handed, lie awake in the darkness, repeat. The money ran out faster than he expected. The final paycheck from Harrington Holdings covered the rent for 1 month, but there were other bills stacking up like accusations on the kitchen counter. Electric, gas, the phone bill that kept the thin thread connecting him to potential employers. Sophie's school lunch account that sent automated reminders every 3 days. Marcus sold what he could. The small television that Sophie watched cartoons on went first, then the microwave. Then the winter coat he had bought himself 2 years ago, the one with the warm lining that kept the Philadelphia cold from seeping into his bones. He told Sophie the coat was at the dry cleaner. He told her the television was being fixed. He built a castle of lies to protect her from the truth that was crumbling around them. The job search became a ritual of humiliation. Every morning, Marcus put on the nicest clothes. He still owned a button-down shirt with a small stain on the collar and khaki pants that were starting to fray at the cuffs. He walked because the bus fare added up too quickly. He smiled at receptionists who looked at him with suspicion. He filled out applications with hands that had stopped trembling because there was no energy left for fear. The cleaning company on 18th Street turned him away before he could finish introducing himself. "You're that guy," the manager said, a heavy-set man with a cigar smell clinging to his shirt and judgment written across his face. "The one from the news." I saved her life, Marcus said. The words felt hollow, now worn thin from repetition. She wasn't breathing. I did what anyone should have done. What you did is make yourself controversial. The manager leaned back in his chair. I can't afford that kind of attention. Clients don't like trouble. I'm not trouble, I just need a chance to work. Try somewhere else. The diner on Market Street needed a dishwasher. Marcus stood at the counter with hope he did not feel anymore and asked to speak to the manager. The woman who came out took one look at him, typed his name into her phone, and her expression hardened. We filled the position, she said. The sign is still in the window. I said we filled it. The grocery store on Walnut Avenue was hiring stockers for the night shift. Marcus filled out the application carefully, his handwriting neat and precise. The store manager called him 2 days later. Mr. Thornton, I've reviewed your application and unfortunately we've decided to go with other candidates. Can I ask why? A pause, a sigh, the sound of someone choosing their words carefully. We did a background check. Your name came up in connection with some concerning news stories. I'm sure you understand. Marcus understood. He understood that the truth did not matter when the lie was louder. He understood that the video of him saving Victoria Harrington's life had been twisted into evidence of assault, shared thousands of times by people who had never met him and never would. He understood that his name had become a scarlet letter burned into the digital fabric of the internet forever. The whispers followed him everywhere now. At the corner store where he bought milk for Sophie, at the bus stop where he waited even when he could not afford the fare, at the laundromat where he washed their clothes with quarters he found between couch cushions. That's him, people would murmur, the janitor, the one who attacked that billionaire. I heard he was obsessed with her, stalking her or something. Disgusting, and he has a daughter too. Marcus learned to keep his head down. He learned to make himself small, invisible, the same way he had learned to be invisible at Harrington Holdings. But this invisibility was different. This was the invisibility of shame, of being seen and judged and found wanting by a world that had already made up its mind. Sophie was the only light left in his darkness. She came home from school every day with drawings she had made in art class, pressing them into his hands like offerings. This one is us, she would say, pointing to stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. See, we're happy. Marcus would smile and pin the drawings to the refrigerator, covering the notices from the electric company and the landlord and all the other paper vultures circling their small life. But Sophie was not blind. She was 7 years old, but she had her father's eyes, the kind that saw too much. Why don't you eat dinner, Daddy? I'm not hungry, sweetheart. You finish yours. But you said breakfast is the most important meal, and you didn't eat breakfast either. I ate at the job interview. They had donuts. Another lie, another brick in the wall he was building between his daughter and the truth. Eleanor saw through him immediately. She started coming over with casseroles that she claimed she had made too much of. She brought groceries that she said were on sale and would go bad if someone did not use them. She sat with Sophie in the evenings, helping with homework and pretending not to notice that Marcus was disappearing piece by piece. You need to eat, Eleanor told him one night after Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch. You can't take care of that little girl if you waste away to nothing. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're drowning and you're too proud to ask for a life jacket. Marcus looked at her, this woman who had known loss and hardship and still managed to find kindness in her heart. I don't know what to do, Eleanor. I've tried everything. No one will hire me. The money's almost gone. I can't even afford to keep the lights on next month. Eleanor reached out and took his hand. Her skin was paper thin and warm. You keep going, she said. That's what you do. You put one foot in front of the other until the road changes. It always changes, Marcus. Sometimes it takes longer than we want, but it changes. And if it doesn't, then you keep going anyway. For Sophie, for yourself, because giving up is not an option when you have someone counting on you. But the road did not change. The road kept stretching out in front of Marcus like a highway to nowhere, and each day he walked a little slower, his steps a little heavier, his heart a little more hollow. The electricity was cut off on a Tuesday. Marcus came home from another fruitless day of job hunting to find Sophie sitting in the dark living room, her teddy bear clutched to her chest. The lights won't turn on, she said. Her voice was small and scared. It's okay, sweetheart. Just a temporary problem. I'll fix it. He lit candles that night. He told Sophie they were having an adventure like camping indoors. She believed him because she wanted to believe him, because believing her father was easier than facing the truth. They ate cold cereal for dinner. Marcus gave Sophie his portion and told her he had already eaten. She fell asleep in his arms, and he held her until the candles burned down to nothing and the darkness was complete. The next morning, Marcus could not get out of bed. It was not a choice. His body simply refused to move. The exhaustion that had been building for weeks had finally reached a breaking point, and everything inside him shut down like a machine running out of power. Sophie stood in the doorway, her small face pinched with worry. "Daddy, are you sick?" "Just tired, sweetheart. I need to rest for a little while." "Should I make you soup?" "Miss Eleanor taught me how to heat up soup." "That would be nice, baby. Thank you." Sophie disappeared into the kitchen. Marcus heard her opening cabinets, moving things around, trying to help in the only way she knew how. The sound broke something inside him. His 7-year-old daughter was taking care of him because he could not take care of himself. The soup was cold when Sophie brought it to him. The electricity was still off, and she did not know how to use the gas stove. But she had found a can of chicken noodle and poured it into a bowl and carried it carefully to his bedside. "I put extra crackers," she said. "Crackers make everything better." Marcus forced himself to take a few bites. The soup was thick and salty and tasted like failure. "Thank you, sweetheart. You're such a good girl." "I'm going to be really good, Daddy. I'm going to be so good that you'll be proud of me, and then everything will be okay." The tears came before Marcus could stop them. He turned his face away, not wanting Sophie to see, but she had already crawled onto the bed beside him and wrapped her small arms around his neck. "Don't cry, Daddy. I love you." "I love you too, baby. More than anything in the world." They lay there together in the gray light of morning, father and daughter, holding on to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. Eleanor found them like that an hour later. She had come to check on them when Marcus did not answer her knock using the spare key he had given her months ago. "Dear God," she whispered when she saw Marcus. His face was flushed with fever. His breathing was shallow and ragged. His eyes, when he opened them, were glassy and unfocused. "Marcus, Marcus, can you hear me?" "Eleanor." His voice was barely a whisper. "Sophie, take care of—" "Don't you dare," Eleanor said, her voice fierce. "Don't you dare give up on me now, Sophie. Honey, I need you to go to my apartment and get my phone. Can you do that?" Sophie nodded, her face pale with fear, and ran out the door. Eleanor pressed her hand to Marcus's forehead. Burning. She had seen this before. The body could only take so much stress before it started to break down. The hunger, the sleepless nights, the weight of despair, pressing down day after day. It caught up eventually. It always caught up. "You're going to be okay," she told him, even though she was not sure it was true. "Help is coming." Across the city, in a world that might as well have been on another planet, Victoria Harrington was waking from another nightmare. It was always the same dream. She was floating in darkness, absolute and complete, her lungs burning for air that would not come. She reached out for something, anything, but there was nothing to hold on to. Just the void swallowing her whole. And then the voice would come, rough with strain but steady with purpose, fighting through the darkness to reach her. "Come on, breathe, come back." She would feel hands on her chest, pressure, pain, life being forced back into a body that had already started to give up. And then she would gasp awake, her heart pounding, her sheets soaked with sweat. 4 times this week. 4 times she had jolted awake in the middle of the night, that voice echoing in her ears like a ghost she could not escape. Victoria sat on the edge of her king-size bed and tried to steady her breathing. The penthouse was quiet. The city lights of Philadelphia glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, like a carpet of stars spread at her feet. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be. Except it was not. Someone had saved her life. The doctors had been very clear about that. She had suffered sudden cardiac arrest in the middle of her boardroom. Without immediate CPR, her chances of survival would have been less than 10%. Someone had kept her heart beating breath by breath until the paramedics arrived. But every time she asked who that someone was, her executives changed the subject. "The situation has been handled, ma'am. Everything is under control, Miss Harrington. You should focus on your recovery. Let us worry about the details. Victoria Harrington had built a $1 billion empire by paying attention to details. She had clawed her cash to the cub of a male-dominated industry by never accepting easy answers. And she was not about to start now. She picked up her phone and called Derek, her head of security. I want the footage from the boardroom, she said, the morning of my cardiac arrest. Everything. I want it in my inbox in 10 minutes. Ma'am, HR has already reviewed the recording. Legal has a copy as well. I didn't ask who reviewed it. I asked for the footage. Now. Yes, ma'am. The email arrived in 8 minutes. Victoria opened it on her laptop, her coffee growing cold beside her. The video started with her standing at the head of the conference table. She was in the middle of presenting the quarterly numbers, her voice confident, her gestures precise. She watched herself stumble, watched her hand fly to her chest, watched her body collapse. And then she watched him. A man in a gray uniform burst through the door. A janitor, judging by the mop he left clattering on the floor. He pushed through the executives who were standing frozen like statues. He dropped to his knees beside her. He checked for a pulse. And then he started CPR. Victoria leaned closer to the screen. She watched his face as he worked. The fear in his eyes, the determination in his jaw, the way he ignored the people shouting at him, grabbing at him, hitting him. She saw someone strike him with an umbrella. She saw him flinch but keep going. She saw Preston Caldwell grab his shoulder and try to pull him away. She saw the janitor tear himself free and continue compressions. And then she saw the moment she came back to life. The jolt of her chest, the first breath, the flutter of her eyes. The man collapsed backward, exhausted, his body trembling. And instead of thanking him, instead of acknowledging what he had done, they treated him like a criminal. They pulled him away from her. They looked at him with disgust. They spoke to him like he was something they had scraped off the bottom of their expensive shoes. Victoria paused the video. Her hands were shaking. She rewound it and watched again. The CPR, the breaths, the compressions, the blows he took him and ignored. The moment he brought her back from the edge of death. This man had saved her life, and they had punished him for it. She called her assistant, Diane Morrison. The man in the security footage, the one who performed CPR on me. What happened to him? There was a pause on the other end. He was terminated, ma'am. There were certain allegations about his conduct. What allegations? Inappropriate contact with a senior executive. The optics were concerning. PR recommended immediate action. Victoria felt something cold settle in her chest. Who authorized his termination? Mr. Caldwell, ma'am. As CFO, he has authority over HR matters. Victoria hung up without another word. She called her security team. I want everything you can find on the man in that video. His name, his address, his employment history, everything. And I want it within the hour. The file arrived 47 minutes later. Victoria read it in silence, her coffee completely forgotten. His name was Marcus Thornton. He was 34 years old. He had a high school diploma and 1 year of community college that he dropped out of due to financial hardship. He had worked as a janitor at Harrington Holdings for 3 months. He was a single father with a 7-year-old daughter named Sophie. His ex-wife had lost custody 3 years ago. He lived in West Philadelphia in a neighborhood known for high crime rates and crumbling infrastructure. There were notes from human resources attached. The termination letter with its cold language about inappropriate conduct. Screenshots of internal communications where her employees discussed the incident in disgusted tones. The janitor was basically kissing her. So creepy. Did you see the video? Good riddance. People like that don't belong in a place like this. Victoria felt something she had not felt in years. Shame. Deep and hot and impossible to ignore. This man had saved her life. He had put his mouth on hers and breathed for her when she could not breathe for herself. He had pressed his hands to her chest and pumped her heart when it had stopped beating. He had taken blows from her employees and kept going because stopping meant letting her die. And this was how her company had repaid him. This was the justice her empire had delivered. Termination. Disgrace. Erasure. Victoria grabbed her car keys. She did not call her driver. She did not summon her assistant. She pulled on jeans and a sweater and walked out of her penthouse like she was fleeing a crime scene. The black Mercedes felt strange in her hands. She could not remember the last time she had driven herself anywhere. There were always cars waiting, drivers standing by, an entire infrastructure designed to keep her from having to do anything as ordinary as operate a vehicle. But this trip felt like something she needed to do alone. The city changed as she drove west. The gleaming towers of downtown gave way to older buildings. The boutiques and coffee shops were replaced by pawn shops and check-cashing stores. The streets grew rougher, the sidewalks more crowded, the faces harder. Victoria had grown up wealthy. Her father had built the foundation of what would become Harrington Holdings, and she had never known hunger or fear or the desperate scramble of poverty. She had read about neighborhoods like this. She had seen them in reports and statistics and the occasional news story, but she had never driven through one. She had never seen the cracked sidewalks and the boarded windows and the children playing in lots filled with weeds and broken glass. The address led her to a brown brick building with a sagging metal staircase and paint peeling from every surface. Victoria parked her Mercedes on the street and got out. The December wind cut through her sweater like a blade. She climbed the stairs to apartment 4A. The hallway smelled like old carpet and cooking oil and something else underneath that she did not want to identify. She knocked on the door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then she heard footsteps, small and hesitant. The door cracked open and a little girl peered up at her. She had dark hair and wide eyes and a teddy bear clutched against her chest. Her clothes were thin for the weather. Her face was pale with fear and something else. Recognition. "You're the lady from the billboard," the girl whispered. Victoria's heart clenched. "I'm looking for Marcus Thornton. He lives here, doesn't he?" The girl's face crumpled. "He's sick," she said. Her voice trembled. "He won't get up. I tried making soup. I tried giving him medicine, but nothing works. He just keeps saying he's tired. Then he lies down again." Victoria pushed the door open gently and stepped inside. The apartment was tiny, a living room that doubled as a kitchen, a couch with cushions worn thin from use, a refrigerator covered in children's drawings, and in the corner, on a thin mattress pushed against the wall, a man lay motionless under two worn blankets. Victoria crossed the room and knelt beside him. Marcus Thornton was barely recognizable. His face was gaunt, his cheeks hollow. His skin was flushed with fever. His breathing was shallow and frightening. She touched his forehead, burning hot. "Marcus," she said. "Marcus, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, glassy, unfocused. He looked at her without recognition. "Sophie," he whispered. "Take care of Sophie." "I'm not Sophie. I'm Victoria Harrington. You saved my life." Something flickered in his eyes, confusion, then nothing. He closed his eyes again. Victoria pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "I need an ambulance. 247 West Morris Street, apartment 4A. Adult male, high fever, unresponsive. Please hurry." She hung up and turned to the little girl who was standing in the corner, her teddy bear pressed to her chest, her eyes wide with terror. "Your daddy is going to be okay," Victoria said. She was not sure it was true, but she said it anyway because this child needed to hear it. "Help is coming. I promise." Eleanor Simmons appeared in the doorway, breathless from climbing the stairs. "I called them too," she said. "Thank God you're here. I don't know who you are, but thank God." "I'm the woman he saved." Eleanor's eyes widened. Then she nodded slowly, as if something that had been confusing suddenly made sense. "Then you know what kind of man he is." "I'm starting to." The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later. The paramedics moved quickly, assessing Marcus, starting an IV, loading him onto a stretcher. Victoria followed them out of the building and into the cold December air. "I'm coming with him," she said. The paramedic looked at her with surprise but did not argue. There was something in her voice that did not invite argument. In the ambulance, Victoria sat beside the stretcher and watched the paramedics work. They called out numbers and medical terms. They hung bags of fluid. They monitored vital signs that looked too weak to sustain life. "Severe dehydration," one of them said. "Fever above 103. Shallow breathing. This is systemic, stress-induced collapse. He's been running on empty for a while." Victoria reached out and took Marcus's hand. His fingers were cold and limp. She thought about the boardroom, the moment she had collapsed, the darkness that had swallowed her whole, and then the voice, rough and determined, pulling her back from the edge. "You fought for me," she whispered. "You didn't even know me, and you fought to keep me alive. Now it's my turn." The hospital was private, the best in the city. Victoria had called ahead and a team of doctors was waiting when the ambulance arrived. They took over immediately, wheeling Marcus through the double doors and into a world of white lights and beeping monitors. Victoria stood in the waiting room, her designer jeans dirty from the apartment floor, her hair windblown, her face pale with exhaustion. A nurse approached her. "We'll take care of him, Miss Harrington. You can wait in the private lounge if you'd like." "I'll wait here. It could be several hours." "Then I'll wait several hours." She sat in a hard plastic chair and stared at the wall. She thought about the choices she had made, the empire she had built, the chain of command she had trusted to handle things she did not want to handle herself. A man had saved her life and her company had destroyed his. That was the truth. That was the weight she would carry no matter what happened next. 3 hours later, a doctor emerged. "He's stable," he said. "Severe exhaustion, dehydration, malnutrition. His immune system crashed under prolonged stress. But he's responding well to treatment. He's going to pull through." Victoria let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Can I see him?" "He's sleeping now, but yes, you can see him." The room was quiet. Marcus lay in the hospital bed, an oxygen tube beneath his nose, fluid dripping steadily into his arm. His face was less gray now, the lines softer. He looked younger in sleep, vulnerable. Victoria pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. She did not leave. Hours passed. Night settled in completely. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting equipment. Sophie arrived with Eleanor, brought by a car Victoria had arranged. The little girl climbed onto the bed and placed her teddy bear on her father's chest. "I took care of you, Daddy," she whispered. "Just like you take care of me." Eleanor sat in the corner, her eyes red from crying but her back straight, with the dignity of a woman who had survived worse and would survive this too. Victoria watched them. This family that had nothing and everything. This man who had given his last breath to save a stranger and received only punishment in return. She thought about Preston Caldwell, about the termination letter, about the screenshots and the whispers and the systematic destruction of one man's life. She thought about the woman she had been before she collapsed in that boardroom. The ice queen, the visionary, the leader who trusted her chain of command because it was easier than looking too closely at what that chain was doing. She was not that woman anymore. She could not be. Not after this, not after seeing what her blindness had cost. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, Marcus stirred. His eyes fluttered open. He blinked several times, confused, trying to make sense of the room around him. His gaze found Sophie first curled up asleep beside him, then Eleanor dozing in the corner chair, and finally Victoria sitting at his bedside like she had been there all along. "Where am I?" His voice was barely a whisper. "You're in the hospital. You collapsed. But you're safe now." He frowned. His eyes searched her face. "Why are you here?" Victoria leaned forward, her voice soft but steady. "Because I watched the footage. All of it. Every second. I saw what you did. I saw how they treated you. And I am so deeply, truly sorry." Moisture gathered at the corners of Marcus's eyes. He turned away, blinking hard. "They said I assaulted you. I know. They took everything from me, my truth, my reputation, my ability to provide for my daughter. I know. I saved your life and they punished me for it. I know." Victoria's voice wavered. "And I'm going to make it right. I don't know how yet, but I promise you, Marcus Thornton, I'm going to make this right." He looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had everything. This woman whose name was on buildings and billboards and the lips of everyone who wanted something from her. "Why should I believe you?" Victoria did not have an answer. Not yet, but she knew with a certainty that settled into her bones like truth that she would spend however long it took to earn that belief. "Because you saved my life," she said finally, "and now it's my turn to save yours." The morning light crept through the hospital blinds like a hesitant visitor. Marcus Thornton lay in the white bed watching the shadows shift across the ceiling. His body ached. His throat was dry. But for the first time in weeks, he felt something other than despair. He felt seen. Victoria Harrington sat in the chair beside his bed, exactly where she had been when he fell asleep. Her designer clothes were wrinkled. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dark circles ringed her eyes like bruises. She looked nothing like the woman on the billboards. She looked human. You stayed, Marcus said. His voice was rough from sleep. Victoria straightened in her chair. I told you I would. People say a lot of things they don't mean. I'm not most people. Sophie was curled up at the foot of the bed, her teddy bear tucked under her chin. Eleanor dozed in the corner chair, her reading glasses still perched on her nose. The room was quiet except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Marcus looked at his daughter, at the woman who had destroyed his life, sitting beside him like a penitent, at the pieces of his shattered world scattered around him. What happens now? He asked. Victoria leaned forward. Her eyes were clear and steady. Now we fix what was broken. I've arranged for you and Sophie and Eleanor to move to a new apartment. Safe neighborhood. Good schools. Fully furnished. No rent until you're back on your feet. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. I don't need charity. This isn't charity. This is restitution. There's a difference, Joyce. The difference being charity is given out of pity. Restitution is given because a debt is owed. Victoria's voice softened. My company took everything from you, Marcus. Your chum, your reputation, your ability to provide for your daughter. I can't undo that, but I can start to make it right. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the apartment in West Philadelphia, the peeling walls and the rattling windows and the water stain named Larry. He thought about Sophie shivering in the winter because the heater could not keep up with the cold. What else, he asked. I'm going to issue a public statement, official and notarized, clearing your name completely, stating that your actions on the morning of my cardiac arrest, which were emergency medical intervention, life-saving, entirely appropriate, no misconduct, no violation. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been clenched tight for weeks began to loosen. And then Victoria hesitated. This was the part she had rehearsed in her head all night, but the words still felt inadequate. I want to offer you a position at Harrington Holdings, not in janitorial services. Something new, something I have been thinking about since I watched that footage. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What kind of position? Director of Employee Welfare. A department that doesn't exist yet. One that you would help design from the ground up. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. You want me to work for you, Peter, Marcus said slowly. The company that fired me. The company that destroyed my life. I want you to help me rebuild what I allowed to rot. I want you to create a system that makes sure no one else goes through what you went through. I want you to be the voice for the people who never get a seat at the table. Marcus looked at her. This woman who had everything. This woman whose signature was worth more than his entire existence. Why me? Victoria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Because you understand. Because you know what it feels like to be invisible. To be treated like you don't matter. To give everything you have and receive nothing in return. She paused. You said something to me last night, when you were barely conscious. You said you didn't want money. You wanted to be seen. You wanted your daughter to grow up in a world where doing the right thing doesn't mean losing everything. Marcus remembered. The words had come from somewhere deep inside him, a place he usually kept locked away. I meant it, he said. I know you did. And I want to help you build that world. Not as charity, not as pity, but because I believe you're the only person who can do it right. Sophie stirred at the foot of the bed. Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw her father awake, her face split into a smile that could have powered the entire hospital. Daddy, you're okay. She scrambled up the bed and threw her arms around him. Marcus held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her small heart beating against his chest. I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm okay. Eleanor woke with a start, her glasses sliding down her nose. When she saw Marcus sitting up, she pressed a hand to her heart. Lord have mercy, she whispered. You scared us half to death, Marcus Thornton. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I didn't mean to. Don't you dare apologize. Just promise me you'll never do that again. I promise. Victoria stood up, giving the family their moment. But before she could leave, Marcus spoke. I'll do it. Victoria turned back. The position? Yes, but not for the money, not for the title. I'll do it because I believe people like me deserve better. And if I can be the one to give them that, then maybe everything I went through wasn't for nothing. Victoria nodded, her vision blurred with emotion, and she did not try to hide it. Thank you, Marcus. Don't thank me yet. I haven't done anything. You saved my life. That's something. That's everything. The new apartment was in a neighborhood Marcus had only ever driven through. Clean streets, trees lining the sidewalks, children playing in parks that had actual grass instead of broken glass and weeds. Sophie ran through the rooms like she was exploring a palace. The kitchen had a refrigerator that actually stayed cold. The living room had windows that did not rattle. Her bedroom had a bed with a real mattress and sheets that smelled like lavender. Daddy, look, I have my own closet. Marcus stood in the center of the living room, still not quite believing this was real. Eleanor was in the kitchen, opening cabinets and making small sounds of approval. There's a dishwasher, she said, a real dishwasher. And the stove has all 4 burners working. On the kitchen counter sat a welcome basket with Marcus's name on it. Flowers, groceries, a card tucked beneath the vase. You deserve peace. VH. Marcus folded the card and pressed it to his chest. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he allowed himself to hope. The public statement came 3 days later. Victoria Harrington stood in front of cameras and microphones and delivered the words that Marcus had been waiting to hear. On the morning of my cardiac arrest, a man named Marcus Thornton saved my life. He performed CPR when no one else would. He took blows to his body and kept going because stopping meant letting me die. And instead of thanking him, my company terminated his employment and allowed his reputation to be destroyed. The cameras flashed. The reporters leaned forward. I am here today to set the record straight. Marcus Thornton is not a predator. He is not a criminal. He is a hero, and I am personally committed to ensuring that he receives the recognition and the opportunity he deserves. The statement went viral within hours. The same internet that had dragged Marcus through the mud now began to turn in his favor. The hashtag changed from hashtag Janitor Predator to hashtag Janitor Hero. People who had condemned him were suddenly praising him. The narrative shifted like sand in the wind, but not everyone was pleased. Preston Caldwell sat in his corner office on the 43rd floor watching the press conference on his computer screen. His face was the color of ash. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair like he was trying to strangle them. He had built his career on control, on managing information, on ensuring that the right people were protected and the wrong people were silenced. He had climbed from nothing to become the chief financial officer of a billion-dollar company, and he had done it by understanding one simple truth. Power belonged to those who controlled the story, and now the story was slipping through his fingers. Preston picked up his phone and dialed a number he had hoped he would never need to use. I need something done, he said, quietly, off the books. The voice on the other end was low and careful. What do you need? There's a man named Marcus Thornton. I want everything you can find on him. Old debts, erased records, juvenile offenses, anything that can be used to discredit him. That's going to cost you. I didn't ask the price, I asked if you could do it. Consider it done. Preston hung up and turned back to his computer screen. Victoria Harrington was still talking, still singing the praises of the janitor who had ruined everything. You think you've won, Preston muttered to the screen, but this isn't over. Not by a long shot. The documents arrived in Preston's inbox 3 days later. A sealed juvenile record from when Marcus Thornton was 16 years old. A misdemeanor charge for theft. The details were sparse but damning enough. Preston leaked the story to a reporter he had cultivated for years. A man who understood the value of a favor and the importance of not asking too many questions. The headline hit the next morning. Billionaire's hero has criminal past Harrington savior, once arrested for theft. The article was everywhere within hours. Cable news picked it up. Social media exploded. The narrative shifted again this time with the brutal efficiency of a machine designed to destroy. Victoria Harrington has been deceived by a man with a criminal record. Sources say Thornton was arrested at 16 for stealing from a pharmacy. Is the so-called hero really a con artist targeting wealthy women? Marcus saw the headlines on his phone while eating breakfast with Sophie. The eggs turned to ash in his mouth. The hope that had been building in his chest collapsed like a house of cards. Daddy, what's wrong, Mom? Nothing, sweetheart. Finish your breakfast. But Sophie could see his face. She could see the way his hands trembled as he set down his phone. She could see the light going out of his eyes. Victoria called within the hour. I saw the news, she said. Marcus, I need you to know that this doesn't change anything. I don't care what happened when you were 16. You should care. Everyone else does. Tell me what happened, the real story. Marcus was silent for a long moment. The memory was old and painful, buried under years of shame and survival. My mother was sick, he said finally. Cancer. We didn't have insurance. We didn't have money for her prescriptions. She was coughing so hard she couldn't sleep. I was 16 years old and I didn't know what else to do. His voice faltered. I went to the pharmacy. I put a bottle of cough medicine in my pocket. I got caught before I even made it to the door. They called the police. I spent a night in juvenile detention. The charges were eventually sealed because I was a minor and it was a first offense. Victoria was quiet on the other end of the line. I never stole anything again, Marcus continued. I worked 3 jobs to pay for my mother's care. I dropped out of college when the money ran out. I did everything I could to make up for that one mistake. But it doesn't matter, does it? One mistake when you're 16 and the world decides that's who you are forever. That's not who you are, Victoria said firmly. That's who you were when you were desperate and scared and trying to save your mother's life. That's not a criminal. That's a child who loved his mother. Try telling that to the internet. I intend to, but first I need you to do something. What? I need you to tell your story, not to me, not to the press, to the people who matter, the employees of Harrington Holdings, the janitors and the security guards and the cafeteria workers, the people who have been invisible their whole lives, just like you. Marcus felt something stir in his chest. Not hope exactly, something stronger, something that felt like purpose. Tomorrow, I'm calling an all-staff meeting at the Executive Annex, 500 people, and I want you to stand in front of them and tell them the truth. The truth about what? Everything, the CP, the termination, the smear campaign, the cough medicine, all of it. Let them see who you really are, and let them decide for themselves whether you're worth believing in. The night before the meeting, Marcus could not sleep. He lay in his new bed in his new apartment, staring at the ceiling that had no water stains, listening to the silence that had no sirens. Sophie was asleep in her room, surrounded by the drawings she had made of butterflies and rainbows. Eleanor was in the guest room, snoring softly. The world was quiet and still and full of possibility, but Marcus's mind was racing. What if they didn't believe him? What if they saw him the same way the executives in the boardroom had seen him? What if he stood up in front of 500 people and they looked at him with the same disgust, the same contempt, the same certainty that he was something less than human? He thought about his mother, about the night he had walked into that pharmacy with nothing but desperation and love in his heart, about the look on her face when the police brought him home. She had not been angry. She had been heartbroken. "You are better than this," she had said through her tears. "You are meant for more than this. Promise me you will never forget that." He had promised, and he had kept that promise for 18 years. He had worked jobs that paid nothing and demanded everything. He had raised a daughter on his own. He had saved a woman's life when everyone else stood frozen. He was not a criminal. He was not a predator. He was a man who had made one mistake when he was 16 years old and had spent every day since trying to be worthy of his mother's faith in him. That was the truth, and tomorrow he would tell it. The executive annex was packed. 500 employees filled the auditorium, sitting in rows of chairs that stretched from the stage to the back wall. Janitors in gray uniforms, security guards in navy blue, administrative assistants and cafeteria workers and maintenance crew. The invisible army that kept Harrington Holdings running. And in the front row, Victoria Harrington sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the stage with an expression that was impossible to read. Marcus stood backstage, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Diane Morrison, Victoria's assistant, touched his arm. "You've got this," she said. "Just tell the truth. That's all you have to do." Marcus nodded, but before he could step toward the stage, a voice stopped him cold. "Going somewhere." Preston Caldwell emerged from the shadows of the backstage area. His silver hair was perfectly styled. His suit was immaculate. His face wore the confident smile of a man who believed he had already won. "You don't belong here," Preston said. "You never did. You're a janitor with a criminal record who got lucky once and now thinks he's something special." Marcus felt the old fear rise up in his chest. The fear of powerful men in expensive suits. The fear of being seen as less than. The fear that had kept him small and silent his entire life. But something else rose up alongside it. Something stronger. "I know exactly who I am," Marcus said quietly. "Do you?" "Because I know who you are too. You're nobody. You're nothing. And when I'm done with you, everyone in that auditorium is going to know it." Preston stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "Go back to your hole, janitor. Go back to the shadows where you belong. This world isn't meant for people like you." Marcus looked at Preston Caldwell, at the expensive woot and the silver hair and the cruel smile, at the man who had ordered his termination without a second thought, at the man who had leaked his sealed juvenile record to destroy him, at the man who had spent his entire career stepping on people who could not fight back. And Marcus felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt free. "You're wrong," Marcus said. His voice was steady now, calm. "I'm not going back to the shadows. I'm done being invisible, and I'm done being afraid of men like you." Preston's smile faltered. "You think you can threaten me? You think that woman out there is going to protect you forever?" "I don't need her protection. I don't need anyone's protection, because the truth is on my side, and that's something you've never had." Marcus stepped past Preston and walked toward the stage. He could feel the CFO's eyes burning into his back, but he did not look back. He did not hesitate. The stage lights were blinding. The auditorium was silent. 500 faces looked up at him, waiting. Marcus gripped the podium and took a deep breath. "My name is Marcus Thornton," he began, "and I am not the kind of hero you see on posters." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. "3 months ago, I was a janitor on the 22nd floor of this building. I worked the night shift. I cleaned the floors that you walk on. I emptied the trash cans that you fill. I was invisible, just like many of you are invisible." The room was completely still now. Every eye was fixed on him. "One morning, I heard a woman scream. I ran into the boardroom and I found Victoria Harrington on the floor, not breathing. The executives in that room, people in suits worth more than I earn in a year, they stood there and did nothing. So I did something. I dropped to my knees and I performed CPR. I breathed for her when she couldn't breathe for herself." His voice broke slightly, but he pushed through. "And when she came back to life, they didn't thank me. They hit me. They dragged me away. They called me a predator. They fired me and destroyed my reputation because a janitor had dared to put his mouth on a billionaire." Murmurs swept through the crowd. "You've probably seen the news this week. The stories about my criminal past. Let me tell you the truth about that." Marcus paused. This was the hardest part. The part he had never told anyone except Victoria. "When I was 16 years old, my mother was dying of cancer. We had no insurance. We had no money. She was coughing so hard she couldn't sleep, and I couldn't afford a bottle of cough medicine. So I walked into a pharmacy and I put that bottle in my pocket. I got caught before I made it out the door." The silence was absolute. "I spent a night in juvenile detention. The charges were sealed because I was a minor, but that mistake has followed me my entire life, and now someone has decided to use it to destroy me again." Marcus looked out at the faces before him. Janitors who had been invisible their whole lives. Security guards who had been treated like furniture. Cafeteria workers who had been spoken to like servants. "I'm not perfect," he said. "I've made mistakes. I've been desperate and scared and broken. But I am standing here today because I believe that the measure of a person is not the worst thing they have ever done. It's what they do when they have a chance to make things right." He gripped the podium harder. "I am not asking for your pity. I am not asking for your forgiveness. I am asking you to look at me and see a human being. Someone who has struggled. Someone who has fallen. Someone who has gotten back up and kept fighting, just like you." His voice grew stronger. "This department that Victoria Harrington has asked me to build, it's for you, for the people who have never had a seat at the table, for the people who have been ignored and overlooked and treated like they don't matter. I want to build a system where your voice is heard, where your work is valued, where you are seen." Marcus looked directly at the front row where Victoria sat with tears streaming down her face. "I can't promise I'll get everything right, I can't promise I won't make mistakes, but I can promise you this: I will never stop fighting for you, Mo, because I am you, and we deserve better." He stepped back from the podium. The auditorium was silent for one eternal moment, and then someone started clapping. A janitor in the third row, then a security guard in the fifth, then a cafeteria worker near the back. The applause spread like wildfire, building and building, until the entire auditorium was on its feet, the sound thundering off the walls like a storm. Marcus stood on the stage, his eyes burning with emotion he refused to let fall. 500 people were standing for hymns, 500 invisible people finally seen. Victoria rose from her seat and walked to the stage. She stood beside Marcus and faced the crowd. The investigation into how Marcus Thornton was terminated has revealed serious misconduct at the highest levels of this company. Preston Caldwell, our chief financial officer, has been relieved of his duties effective immediately. Further investigations are ongoing. A gasp swept through the crowd. Marcus turned to see two security guards escorting Preston Caldwell through a side door. The CFO's face was pale with rage, but he did not struggle. He walked out with his head held high, even as his empire crumbled around him. "This company was built on the promise of integrity," Victoria continued. "We failed to uphold that promise. But today, we begin again, with Marcus Thornton leading the way." The applause erupted again, even louder than before. 6 months later, Marcus stood on a stage at a national conference on labor rights. The auditorium was 3 times the size of the one at Harrington Holdings, filled with executives and activists and journalists from across the country. The employee welfare program he had designed had become a model for corporations nationwide. In the first 6 months, more than 200 reports of workplace misconduct had been investigated. 7 managers had been terminated for abuse of power. 12 employees who had been unfairly overlooked were promoted to positions they deserved. The program had a name now: the Thornton Initiative. Marcus had tried to refuse the honor, but Victoria had insisted. "Your name should be on this," she had said, "so that every person who benefits from it knows who fought for them." Now Marcus stood at the podium looking out at a sea of faces. He thought about his mother, about Sophie, about Eleanor, about every person who had ever been told they were not good enough, not important enough, not worthy enough. "I once believed that justice was blind," Marcus said, "but I learned the hard way that justice often refuses to look down. It sees the powerful, it sees the wealthy, it sees the connected. But the people at the bottom, the ones who clean the floors and guard the doors and serve the food, we are invisible." He paused. "But we don't have to be." In the front row, Sophie sat beside Eleanor. The little girl was wearing a new dress, her hair braided with ribbons. Beside her sat Gracie, the classmate who had defended Sophie when the whole school turned against her. The two girls held hands and watched the stage with shining eyes. "I stand here today not as a hero," Marcus continued. "Heroes are supposed to be perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm a single father who once stole cough medicine for his dying mother. I'm a janitor who got fired for saving a life. I'm a man who fell down and got back up and kept fighting, even when the world wanted me to stay down." His voice filled the auditorium. "If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this: your voice matters. Your work matters. You matter. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let anyone make you feel invisible. Because every time one of us stands up and refuses to be silenced, the world gets a little bit brighter for everyone." He finished speaking and the applause washed over him like a wave. But Marcus was not looking at the crowd. He was looking at his daughter. Sophie broke free from Eleanor's hand and ran toward the stage. Marcus knelt down and caught her in his arms, lifting her up as the camera flashes exploded around them. "I'm so proud of you, Daddy," Sophie whispered in his ear. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. Every single day." Victoria Harrington sat in the back row watching the father and daughter embrace. She had declined to sit in the front. This was Marcus's moment, not hers. She thought about the morning in the boardroom, the darkness that had swallowed her, the voice that had pulled her back. She thought about the man she had been too busy and too important to notice until he was kneeling over her body, fighting to keep her alive. He had saved her life, and in doing so, he had changed it. That night, Marcus sat on the balcony of his apartment, Sophie curled up in his lap. The lights of Philadelphia spread out before them like a carpet of stars. Eleanor was inside humming softly while she made hot chocolate. "Daddy," Sophie said. "Yes, sweetheart. Are you happy now?" Marcus looked at his daughter, at the city that had once tried to crush him, at the stars that continued to shine no matter how dark the night. He thought about everything he had lost, the papa, the reputation, the weeks of darkness and despair. He thought about everything he had gained, the new apartment, the new position, the hundreds of workers whose lives were better because he had refused to give up. He thought about his mother, who had believed in him even when he could not believe in himself. He thought about Eleanor, who had refused to abandon him when everyone else walked away. He thought about Victoria Harrington, who had looked at the footage of a dying janitor saving her life and chosen to see a human being instead of a problem. "Yeah, baby," Marcus said, pulling his daughter closer. "Finally, I'm happy." They sat together in the quiet night, father and daughter, watching the city breathe below them. The road had been long and brutal and filled with pain, but Marcus Thornton had walked every step of it. And now, at last, he had found his place in the world. Not in the shadows, not invisible, but standing tall in the light where everyone could see him, where everyone could finally see. The story of Marcus Thornton became legend in the years that followed. They wrote articles about him. They made documentaries. They held him up as an example of what one person could accomplish when they refused to surrender. But Marcus never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the cold floors he had mopped, the trash cans he had emptied, the nights he had worked alone while the city slept. He kept a photo on his desk at Harrington Holdings, not of his awards or his achievements. A photo of Sophie on her first day of school, gap-toothed and grinning, holding a drawing of two stick figures under a yellow sun. "That's us, Daddy," she had said. "We're happy." They were happy against all odds, despite everything the world had thrown at them. And every morning when Marcus walked through the doors of the building where he had once been invisible, he made a point to greet every janitor by name, to thank every security guard, to smile at every cafeteria worker, because he knew what it meant to be unseen. And he had vowed that no one in his orbit would ever feel that way again. The end came not with fanfare, but with quiet contentment. Years later, when Marcus was old and gray and Sophie had children of her own, he would look back on his life and marvel at the strange journey fate had taken him on. From the mop bucket to the boardroom, from the shadows to the spotlight, from invisible to unforgettable, all because he had done what anyone should have done. He had seen a person in trouble and he had chosen to help. That was the lesson of Marcus Thornton's life, the one he passed down to his daughter and she to her children after that. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to act despite it. Justice is not handed down from above. It is built from below by ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And every single person, no matter how small or overlooked or forgotten, has the power to change the world. You just have to be willing to stand up. You just have to refuse to be invisible. You just have to breathe life into a world that has forgotten how to breathe. And never, ever stop.